in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. My name is Daisy Thorne. My great-grandmother, grandmother, and mother have all been concubines for generations. Mother told me that with such a deep, rooted tradition, I was destined to become a master of the inner chambers. If I don't fight, so be it. But once I fight, I must never lose. When I was 12, Mother knelt and washed the First Lady's feet for an entire month, all to secure a marriage arrangement for me. A marriage as a concubine. Before leaving home, she gripped my hand tightly and instructed me, word by word. For someone in a concubine's position to live peacefully, there's only one path. Make your husband favor you and destroy the wife. Once you become the principal wife and hold power, you can have anything you want to eat, anything you desire. I trusted Mother. All my life, I believed she only taught me what was best. The moment I stepped into Morgan Manor, I suppressed all my fears deep inside. Day by day, step by step, I followed the plan already laid out. First, I had to make my husband notice me, then let him witness the wife mistreating me. When the two of them argued fiercely, I would seize the opportunity to intervene. By repeating this pattern over and over, eventually he would see me as gentle and understanding, while seeing the wife as bitter and vicious. Then surely, one day I could return to my mother's home with pride. Mother herself had walked this exact path before. To win my husband's favor, I woke earlier than the dogs in the courtyard. Before dawn broke, while stars still hung in the sky, I had already swept the yard, watered the flowers, wiped the furniture, and washed the clothes. I worked even harder than Mother did in her time. She once told me that diligence is a virtue, and to be favored, you must first let people see your virtue. My husband loved horses and would go to the stables every few days to groom them. I thought this was my chance. One morning, I brought a large basin of water to the stables, planning to wash my husband's feet. But the moment I removed his thick socks, I immediately regretted it. Mother never told me that a man's feet could smell that terrible. It was like, since I'd never studied literature, I didn't know what words to use to describe that peculiar, complex odor that hurt my brain. All I could do was hold my breath, quickly dunk his feet in the water, dry them, and put his socks back on. When I lifted the basin, my vision went dark and I nearly fainted. My husband's feet were like poison. But I didn't give up. From then on, whenever I saw my husband's figure, I would secretly stuff cloth up my nose, carry water, and wash his feet. Half a month passed like this, yet he didn't reward me with a single coin. Truly as stingy as my own father, cold-hearted and calculating, disgustingly miserly. I honestly couldn't understand why the lady would marry such a stingy husband with foul-smelling feet. The lady had exquisite beauty, graceful as an immortal descended to earth. When she wore her snow-white robes, even the spring breeze seemed to soften. As she walked past, I'd never seen anyone more beautiful than her. But she wasn't easy to deal with either. The very first time we met, she calmly ordered me to wear clothes identical to the other servants in the manor. I understood she was warning me not to have illusions, just as the First Lady back home once forced my mother to bow and serve. She wanted me to know my place. Mother always taught me that the principal wife and concubines are natural enemies. You must be cautious, think 7 times before speaking, and watch every tiny gesture. So at first, I only bowed and acted submissive. But then she confused me. When I swept the courtyard, she casually tossed me a piece of silver. When I helped her change clothes, she gave me a gleaming pearl right after I served her. The small purse I kept on me was already bulging. Outwardly, I still bowed and quietly thanked the lady, but inside I was as delighted as a child given candy. One day, I couldn't help but ask, "My lady, why do you give me so much?" She looked up from her account books, her eyes sparkling with a smile, her face blooming like spring flowers. "As long as you work hard, your mistress has no shortage of money." Then she casually tossed another piece of silver into my palm, as if it meant nothing at all. I stood there stunned. So women could be this generous too. Then why did I need to carry water every day to wash that smelly husband's feet? The lady wasn't just beautiful and fragrant, she was also kind and wealthy. Clearly, winning her favor was far wiser. From that day on, I paid no attention whatsoever to my husband. Every day, I stayed by the lady's side, serving her from morning till night. She wasn't like the First Lady back home, who spent her idle time oppressing and bullying my mother. The lady was busy every day. sometimes calculating accounts, sometimes experimenting with strange dishes. Some reeked and tasted burnt, some were sour and spicy enough to numb your tongue, and others were sweet pastries as soft as clouds. She told me she'd traveled everywhere with her father in trade, eating delicacies from east to west, knowing which regions had what products and which seasons brought which flavors. As she worked, she'd tell stories, her sleeves rolled up to reveal pale wrists, her hands moving deftly, her mouth chattering away about flowing honey from Liuba, blue crabs from Anzhou, Zhang's silk threads, and mutton from Shanwu County. As she spoke, I could even hear her swallowing. I propped my chin in my hands, staring at her in a daze, feeling as if I'd wandered into another world. A vast, prosperous world I'd never imagined before. The lady looked at me, her hands greasy with oil, and gently booped my cheek, smiling softly. Daisy, this world isn't just this tiny inner courtyard. In the future, you must go out and see how vast the world truly is. I clutched her sleeve, rubbing against it like a kitten. Yes, in the future I'll definitely follow you to see the world, my lady. At the end of the month, everyone lined up to receive their wages. The lady gave me a pouch full of coins and gently patted my head. I suppressed my joy, waiting until no one was looking before sneaking it open. Inside, on a layer of red silk, lay a plump silver ingot. Mother had served my father her entire life and never once received a whole ingot. That night I stayed awake until late, sometimes pulling back the blanket to admire my treasure, sometimes reaching out to touch it, then gently sniffing it. Silver smelled wonderful, but I didn't feel safe keeping that much silver on me. So I secretly got up in the middle of the night, snuck out to the back courtyard, found a hidden corner, and dug a hole to bury it with my own hands. Only after burying it did my heart settle. Then I took out what little literacy I had and wrote a crooked letter to send home to Mother. My lady is different from yours. She's beautiful, kind, and generous. From now on, I vow to follow her and live my life. After that time, I didn't bother looking at my husband even once. Every day I stayed close by the lady's side. When the lady reviewed account books, I massaged her shoulders and legs. When the lady took her afternoon rest, I fanned her, shooed away flies, and prepared fruit. When the lady went out to inspect her shops, I followed behind carrying her bags. That's right. The lady owned several fabric shops. Every time she made her rounds, she walked in front with her hands clasped behind her back, while I followed with my head held high, looking extremely dignified. All the people working in the shops were beautiful young women. Whenever they saw the lady, they bloomed like flowers. One after another, they called her boss, and the lady was surrounded by them. Such a lively scene. Every time we visited a shop, my cheeks got pinched red by the girls. But since they gave me milk candies, I forgave them and didn't hold it against them. Those days were truly wonderful. I'd never met women who lived as vibrantly as the lady and those older sisters. They didn't waste time skimming against others or figuring out how to please men. They focused only on their own joy and earning money for themselves. Compared to them, the women in the inner chambers back home, even the first lady, though she managed the household finances, still seemed to have murky, stagnant pools in their eyes. Not to mention my mother, who never dared lift her head her entire life. I just wanted to write Mother immediately, urging her to pack her things and leave that place. O divine immortals, please bless me. I knelt by the window, praying sincerely under the moonlight. Bless me so I can follow the lady for my entire life, and bless me so I can get rich quickly. I added in a small voice. Autumn leaves fell across the courtyard. It was nearly the lady's birthday. More than 10 men and women gathered, lively and bustling. The lady and several older sisters ate large portions of meat and drank wine freely, celebrating joyfully without restraint. I stood to the side watching, stunned. The lady's younger brother was truly annoying, buzzing in my ear like a fly, constantly calling me little servant girl. Perhaps because the lady tricked him into drinking a sip of wine, I slapped the table and smacked him straight across the face, stammering loudly, "I'm not a servant. I'm a concubine. I'm your elder." The moment I finished speaking, I collapsed and fainted. When I woke up, I learned I'd made a complete fool of myself. It turned out the first lady back home had sold me as a servant. I wasn't a concubine at all. I also got to see Lord Felix Morgan's true appearance. He was like an immortal descended from heaven, truly a perfect match for the lady. Oh, and the person whose feet I'd washed for half a month was actually the stable master. The older servant sisters told me Lord Felix was the top imperial scholar. After receiving his appointment, he went out to handle the drought relief efforts. He only returned near the end of the lady's birthday celebration. They also said the lady and Lord Felix were childhood sweethearts with deep affection. Indeed, ever since Lord Felix returned, my lady had been completely claimed by him, leaving me only able to secretly hide in corners watching them cuddle together. Not only that, but the lady's younger brother, little Ethan Shaw, also constantly ordered me around, sometimes making me copy characters, sometimes making me pretend fight with him, playing the role of a warrior he defeats. Afterward, he'd criticize my handwriting and say my warrior performance was inadequate. I was furious enough to want to grab a broom and beat him, but I didn't dare. The next time he ordered me around, I just pretended not to see or hear him. Who knew he wouldn't say a word? He simply tossed me a gold coin. Good heavens. Turned out he was even more generous than his older sister. I bit the gold coin lightly, my mouth trembling. Young master, I don't just know how to play a defeated warrior. I can also play animals or anything else the young master wants. In the end, I didn't have to play any animals, but my young master had to kneel in the ancestral hall. The young master didn't like studying. He was mischievous by nature and loved causing trouble. Every few days he'd make the lady so angry, she'd chase him around the courtyard with a horse whip. I couldn't even count how many times he got beaten for crimes like stealing exam papers, pulling down someone's pants, or drawing turtles on the teacher's face. In short, not a single thing he did was decent. The lady once taught me that boys like him are called, cats hate him, dogs despise him. How impressive you are. You even dared stomp on the finance minister's son, and you stomped him right into a manure pit. In the ancestral hall, the lady's face flushed red with anger, the long whip in her hand cracking sharply. Before this, Minister Reed's wife had led a whole entourage storming to our manor demanding justice. They said their young master nearly drowned in the manure pit and insisted the lady break one of the young master's legs as compensation. The lady had to plead and negotiate extensively, finally settling the matter by compensating them with over half our family fortune. The lady suppressed her fury and asked the young master, "Why did you do this?" The young master stood stiff-necked, refusing to yield. Anyone whose mouth is full of nothing but shit belongs in a manure pit, no question about it. He got whipped again. The lady was so angry she pounded her chest. But after finishing the beating, she still sent me to bring him medicine. I wasn't willing. So when I applied the medicine to the young master, I deliberately used a heavier hand. Hearing him cry out in pain, I finally felt a bit better. He kept making the lady angry all day. He deserved the pain. Day after day passed. Throughout the entire manor courtyard, every spot where treasures could be buried, I'd already filled completely. The lady was generous, and the little young master spent money like water. Because of this, I buried more and more. Perhaps I was the luckiest servant girl in the world. Occasionally I'd overhear the ladies mention how some household executed a concubine who didn't know her place, their voices as light as if crushing an ant. If I hadn't met the lady, I feared I'd have met the same fate, wrapped in a straw mat and my body discarded. How could I have such good days as these? Not only earning silver, but also having the lady teach me to write, understand propriety, and how to treat people properly. When I reached the age to arrange hair, the lady gave me my indenture contract as a birthday gift. She said if I wanted to marry, she'd prepare a dowry for me. If I wanted to stay and work with her, she'd arrange for me to apprentice at the fabric shop. I didn't understand why she asked this. Every day I stayed glued to the lady's side. How could my eyes possibly hold any other man? For my entire life, I absolutely would not consider marriage. I didn't want to become a beast of burden for someone else. I only wished to follow the lady and earn money. I'd calculated carefully. After setting aside a portion of silver to send mother each month, I still had over 30 taels left. If this continued for a few more years, I could buy a house in a county near Hua capital for mother to enjoy her old age in comfort. The lady once said her dream was to become the wealthiest silk merchant in the Yongyuan realm. I thought seriously and replied, "Then this servant will follow the lady and become the wealthiest servant girl." I thought I'd spend my entire life by the lady's side, serving her children and then her grandchildren. But calamity struck without warning. A group of officials carrying torches stormed into the manor and arrested both the lady and Lord Felix. Rumors spread everywhere that the newly appointed top scholar Felix had exploited the drought relief efforts to embezzle funds. The servants in Morgan Manor scattered in chaos, gathering their belongings to seek shelter elsewhere. At the time, I naively thought the lady would only be gone temporarily and would return. I stayed behind to watch over the vast manor, my heart full of anxiety. All I could do was sweep and clean every corner of the manor over and over again. The lady loved cleanliness. I thought when she returned and saw the clean manor, she'd surely be pleased. But the lady never came back. One rainy night, old Thomas, who'd left the manor long ago, came knocking at Morgan Manor's gate. I joyfully ran out to greet him, only to see the little young master on the cart, his entire body soaked in blood. Old Thomas was drenched from head to toe, his expression extremely grim. He said the lady had been locked in death row and couldn't return. The young master had gone everywhere seeking help, but was ambushed by enemies in an alley and beaten nearly to death. The clinics refused to take him in. Doctors couldn't be summoned. The enemies had interfered. In the end, with no other choice, old Thomas brought the young master back to Morgan Manor. Old Thomas and I carried the young master inside. Before leaving, old Thomas looked at me as if wanting to speak but stopping himself. I knew what he wanted to say. Nothing more than advising me to be sensible and look after myself before it was too late. Old Thomas had an 80-year-old mother at home and a son who'd been chronically ill for years. The monthly wages the lady paid weren't even enough for medicine. Before, whenever we worked together, he'd often lament how difficult life was, living no different from oxen and horses. He had his own hardships. I understood. I didn't blame him for seeking another path for his family's sake. But the lady's kindness to me was as heavy as a mountain. When she wasn't here, naturally I had to take care of her younger brother properly in her place. The young master's body burned hot as steam. I was so worried I could jump. I wasn't skilled in medicine. Only now did I deeply regret that when the lady gathered herbs before, I'd only focused on swatting mosquitoes instead of learning anything. With no choice, I gathered all the medicinal herbs in the manor, brewed them into a bowl of pitch, black liquid, and poured it straight down the young master's throat in one go. For 3 days straight, I didn't dare close my eyes. Every little while I'd check the young master's breathing, terrified he wouldn't die from the enemies but from my accidentally poisoning him instead. Fortunately, 3 days later the young master woke up. But then officials came to seal Morgan Manor and drove us out, escorting us to the temporary settlement village for refugees outside the city walls. The young master was still very weak. He'd just wake for a moment then fall unconscious again. The aunties in the village were very enthusiastic, bringing us porridge and water. They wouldn't leave right away, but would linger by the young master's side. They praised him, saying they'd never seen such a handsome young man. I didn't think the young master looked any different from ordinary people. Everyone has 2 eyes, 1 nose, and 1 mouth. Dr. Chen in the village used to be a physician. He said the young master's injuries were severe. His life could be saved, but his legs were broken. He needed medicine applied and complete bed rest. Whether he could walk again in the future depended on fate. That particular bunding herb grew on Mount Dayan, about 30 miles away. It was also sold in the city, but I had no money. Under the scorching sun, climbing the treacherous mountain, I finally felt regret, blaming myself for burying all my wealth underground so that when we were driven from the manor, I didn't have a single coin on me. Though the young master had awakened, he seemed soulless. All day without speaking a word, just sitting there staring blankly at the thatched roof. No, he could still swing his arm to knock over the medicine bowl, which he did for days on end. All the medicine I'd painstakingly gathered for the young master got knocked over. Even Dr. Chen couldn't take it anymore and spoke up. Little Daisy walks for days just to gather herbs and bring them back. Her hands got poisoned by the plants, turning red and swelling up. You shouldn't waste her good intentions like this. Seeing the young master still showed no reaction, Dr. Chen and I discussed it and decided to use force to make him drink the medicine. I didn't care whether he resented it or not. I just needed to heal his wounds so the lady could have peace of mind when she learned of it. I'd already rolled up my sleeves, ready to hold the young master down. But unexpectedly, when I brought the medicine bowl to his bedside, he opened his mouth slightly. Though his face scrunched up, in the end he drank it. The matter of the lady being imprisoned in death row weighed on my heart, like a mountain. But aside from drinking medicine, the young master just lay motionless, eyes squeezed shut. Fearing that mentioning the lady would cause him more heartache, I temporarily set it aside and went to help the aunties in the village with farming in exchange for food. Fortunately, the aunties in this village were very kind, though the young master's appearance also helped somewhat. These past days we'd been living on the porridge and steamed buns they gave us. But relying on others' kindness to survive couldn't last forever. Moreover, the young master needed money for medicine. The lady also needed money to manage affairs in prison. After settling the young master, I walked 10 miles into the city to find work. The lady had taught me many things, from reading and writing to calculating accounts. Plus I was healthy and strong, surely I could find work. But heaven didn't favor me. At the tea house I was driven away. At the tavern I was mocked. Everywhere I went, I was rejected. For days on end I faced difficulties wherever I went. I wouldn't give up. I borrowed a basket of flowers from an auntie in the village to sell at the Western market, thinking everything would work out. But when I set up my stall, I encountered a gang of thugs. They not only stole all my flower money but also kicked me. That was it. Not only did I fail to earn money, I now owed the village auntie. Only then did I realize something was wrong. Suddenly I remembered what old Thomas had said about enemies who'd severely injured the young master. Could they have been plotting behind my back? But the young master was already injured this badly. No matter how big the grudge, it should have ended. Why did they still want to make things difficult for me? Wait. Could the young master have murdered their parents or stolen someone's wife? Thinking of the young master's terrible behavior in the past, I felt this possibility wasn't impossible. With worry about the enemies weighing on my heart, I hurried home only to see someone lying sprawled in the muddy ground, hair disabled, looking quite frightening. "Young master, what are you doing lying on the ground?" I approached, about to reach out to help him up. "Get lost." Perhaps because he hadn't spoken in many days, his voice was hoarse and rough, as if his throat had been burned by fire. I was furious. Before leaving, I'd prepared enough water and food for him. Why wouldn't he lie properly in bed when so severely injured, but instead lie flat on the dirt? But then I understood. The fault was mine. I'd been too busy and forgot. I'd only prepared a chamber pot for him. These past days I hadn't seen him use the toilet, nor had I paid attention. Smelling the odor rising up, he must have been holding it for many days. I tried to suppress the smell and reached out to help him. But the moment I touched his sleeve, he forcefully pushed me away. His face full of anger, he shouted, "Get away." I fell sitting on the ground, nearly choking from holding my breath. Good intentions met with no gratitude. If not for respecting the lady, who would bother caring about you? I hadn't eaten all day. My stomach was so empty it stuck to my back. I stood up, dusted myself off, walked into the kitchen, grabbed a cold steamed bun, sat on the ground, and ate it dipped in hot water. "By the way, young master, have you ever seen maggots in a latrine pit?" I asked while chewing the bun. "When waste accumulates in a pit for too long, it breeds maggots. Those pale white little things love to crawl into holes most of all. If you don't clean up in time." I took a sip of water and continued quietly. "Then I guarantee when the sun rises tomorrow morning, you'll feel your bottom getting very itchy." Finishing the last bite of bun, I sat down beside him and said gently, "Young master, do you know why you'll itch? It's because maggots will be gnawing at your flesh." Having said that, I didn't bother with him anymore, and turned to go inside to fetch a broom to sweep. Before long, a weak and embarrassed voice sounded, "Help me inside." The young master's face looked terrible, but his ears turned bright red. He lay on the bed, eyes closed, as if accepting his fate. When I was about to reach for his belt to remove his pants, he quickly spoke up. "Close your eyes. You're not allowed to look." "All right, I definitely won't look." My mouth agreed, but my eyes opened as wide as possible. If I closed them, what if my hands accidentally touched something filthy? The young master's legs were long and straight. Such a shame his knees were ulcerated and looked quite ugly. No, there was another place that was extremely ugly too. I removed his soiled underwear and immediately threw it out to the courtyard. I quickly returned to wipe him clean and put on fresh underwear. Then I went outside to wash the dirty clothes. After finishing everything, I returned inside. He still lay rigid and straight, but his head had turned toward the wall, his body trembling, not making a single sound. The young master is truly pitiful. I sighed. A wealthy young master should have lived in silk and brocade, enjoying glory and wealth his entire life. Who would have thought he'd now become a cripple, lying on a bed in a thatched house, unable to do anything for himself? I said nothing, just stood in the shadows silently watching him. Only after a long while did I approach the bed, my voice gentler, intending to comfort him. Young master, do you feel completely useless? If you want to cry, just cry out loud. Holding it in like this will make you sick. His body, which had been trembling, suddenly went stiff. The young master turned his head sharply, his eyes bloodshot, grinding his teeth as he spoke. Even you, a mere servant, dare to look down on me. Get out right now. He shouted at me, sweeping his arm to knock the bowl of porridge and medicine by the bed onto the floor. The porridge and medicine spilled everywhere. What a mess. If not for the circumstances, seeing the snot running down to his mouth, I nearly burst out laughing. But I didn't dare laugh. I obediently got out. Going outside to lie on the pile of straw, I thought that after venting his anger, the young master would tire and sleep. But late at night, I heard him speaking. I didn't dare make a sound, only pricked up my ears to listen. His voice was barely audible, as if whispering to himself. You're right. I'm truly useless. I'm just a waste of space. Lying here, I can't even go to the toilet by myself, let alone save my older sister. My sister often beat me. She must have hated me terribly. Because when I was born, I caused mother's death. Then I made father die of anger. And now even... His voice became increasingly choked, finally becoming nothing but suppressed sobbing. I said nothing, just silently listened to him release his feelings. Remembering my childhood, mother and I had to eat chaff and swallow wild vegetables. When hunger became unbearable, I even secretly stole a chicken leg from the First Lady's little dog. Back then I asked myself, what's the point of being alive? Just to compete with dogs for food. Later, mother took a torn piece of cloth, tied it into a rope, hung it from the roof beam, and tremblingly stepped onto a chair. I thought she was making a swing and hugged her legs, whining that I wanted to play first. Mother, tears streaming down her face, gritted her teeth and endured, continuing to live. She lived until she sent me to Morgan Manor, until I met the lady. Only then did I realize that people live so they can encounter beautiful things, meet good people. Only then is a lifetime not wasted. That night, I heard myself say to the young master, as long as the lady is alive, we have hope. As long as we're alive, the lady has hope. To prevent the young master from soiling himself again, I asked Widow Anderson, who often came to sit in the house, to watch over him. Then I took a steamed bun into the city to gather information. The prison guard kept his mouth tightly shut. I had to pester him shamelessly for several days before extracting a bit of information. He said that according to Yongyuan law, executions weren't permitted from the beginning of spring onward. Autumn trials would come in another 8 months. During that time, if we could gather enough money to pay the redemption fine, the death sentence could be commuted. Redeeming both of them would require 500,000 wen, that is, 500 taels of silver. In other words, I had to earn a full 500 taels to save the lady and Lord Felix. Even if I sold myself entirely, I couldn't cover a fraction of that amount. But at least there was a glimmer of hope now. I calculated carefully how I could possibly gather such an enormous sum within 8 months. The lady's fabric shops couldn't be relied upon. The moment Morgan Manor fell into trouble, rival shops hired thugs to vandalize them, claiming they were carrying out heaven's justice. The embezzlement charges had completely destroyed the Morgan family's reputation. Common folk no longer wanted to buy fabric from us. Within just a few days, all the shop managers had left. The stores stood empty. No matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't come up with any feasible solution. When I hurried back to the village to report the news to the young master, I didn't expect to startle Widow Anderson. Inside the thatched house, Widow Anderson sat by the bed, holding the young master's hand tightly. She was chattering and laughing flirtatiously. The young master pressed himself against the wall, one hand clutching his chest, his face bright red. Whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. Seeing me enter, Widow Anderson reluctantly released his hand. As she walked away, she turned back, her voice dripping with sweetness, as if it could be squeezed into liquid. Darling, Tomorrow I'll come back and continue telling you about the mystical wine and palm reading arts. I had a bit of an eye for people, and knew immediately that entrusting the young master to Widow Anderson was the right decision. A few days ago his face had been deathly pale, lying on the bed in melancholy. Now his complexion had turned rosy, and he even had the strength to wipe the bed. Truly excellent progress. Seeing me, the young master rarely took the initiative to speak, frowning. Wrong. Bring me a basin of water to wash my hands. Wash hands. I looked around the thatched house. It was just roughly assembled wooden planks. Light leaked through the gaps onto the dirt floor. When it rained, inside and outside were no different. Had he misunderstood our circumstances? What gave him the illusion that we had basins and towels for washing hands here? But he was the young master and I was a servant. I resigned myself to my fate and searched around for a while. In the end, I could only hold out my soaking wet sleeve in front of him. The young master frowned so deeply his eyebrows formed a deep crease. He hesitated for a long while. Just when my arm grew tired and I was about to lower it, he suddenly grabbed my sleeve and carefully wiped each slender finger clean. Truly slender and precious fingers indeed. I couldn't help but blurt out, "Sister Anderson is clean and kind-hearted. Why do you dislike her so much?" Widow Anderson not only took such pains caring for him, but also amused him with palm reading. If the aunties who liked Widow Anderson knew about his disgusted expression, who knew when his injuries would ever heal? Perhaps the palm reading had strained his chest muscles. The young master gritted his teeth and lay down, closed his eyes and took several sharp breaths, then lay straight as a corpse again. I blamed myself for talking too much. That night, the sky poured down rain like water being dumped. Inside and outside the house truly had no difference. I hurriedly picked several large banana leaves to shield the young master from the rain, fearing he'd catch cold and develop a fever. Poor families can't afford illness. I don't know when the rain stopped, but I just held those banana leaves and drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, I immediately tossed the banana leaves aside and reached out to touch the young master's clothes. They were only slightly damp, nothing to worry about. The young master was leaning against the bed, already awake for who knows how long, watching me with a complicated expression. "You're just a servant. You don't owe Morgan Manor anything. Just go home, you don't need to do this much." I wiped my mouth and waved my hand dismissively. For the one I love, I'm willing and content. In this life, the person I love most, besides mother, is the lady. The lady treats me like her own younger sister, giving me silver, teaching me how to be a person. It was the lady who helped me understand that women in this world don't exist just to be beasts of burden for men. They can live for themselves. Compared to everything she's done for me, what I'm doing is nothing at all. The moment I finished speaking, a violent coughing fit erupted in the room. The young master clutched his chest with one hand, coughing until his face scrunched up, looking quite miserable. I quickly stepped forward to help him ease his breathing, but he reacted as if seeing a ferocious beast. Still coughing, he pressed himself against the wall. I awkwardly withdrew my hand. His reaction made me feel as if I were teasing some sheltered young lady. But looking at his flushed face, he must be recovering soon. Once he fully recovered, I could shake off all these burdens and focus completely on earning money to redeem the lady and Lord Felix. After being touched by Widow Anderson, the young master immediately issued a cold prohibition forbidding her from entering the house. But how could such a flimsy little door stop anyone? So he coldly ordered me to carry him outside to set up a stall. Thinking about it, getting some fresh air might help his recovery, so I carried him onto the cart and set up a stall. We earned a bit of money, but I feared it wouldn't even cover a full meal. None of the shops in the city wanted to hire me. At this point there was no better method. First, we had to survive. I suggested the young master go borrow money. He showed a hint of shame and fell silent for a long while before awkwardly answering that no one would lend to him. Ever since the Morgan family fell, those who used to eat and play with him all avoided him like the plague. Not one person was willing to help in his time of need. Honestly, the lady once said he was the type who made people both hate and despise him. Quite true. His character was so terrible, he couldn't find a single person to lend him money. However, bringing him along wasn't completely useless. It turned out that no matter what I sold, there was always a long queue in front of our stall. From 60-year-old grannies to year-old girls, many ladies came just to join the fun even without buying anything. Thanks to this, business became bustling. Only after a while did I realize everyone came because of the young master. Wasn't he just a living advertisement sign? So I was in charge of working while the young master was in charge of smiling charmingly and calling out. At first he adamantly refused, but I pressured him by invoking the lady. He had no choice but to reluctantly open his mouth. After a few times, he thickened his face enough to hawk our wares. Don't think our village folk were poor. This place actually had many skilled craftspeople. Most of the aunties and uncles had drifted here due to disasters, and they all lived by their crafts. Especially those aunties who could transform ordinary ingredients into exquisite dishes. With money, I'd buy the food they made and bring it to market to sell. At the morning market I sold steamed buns, wontons, and 7 treasure porridge made by the aunties. At the noon market I sold vegetarian noodles and vegetarian buns made by Widow Anderson. At the evening market I sold hairpins and small shoes made by the village aunties. Daisy, if you dare stick more of these things on my head, just you wait and see. Ethan yanked the hairpin from his head, about to throw it away. I shot him a glance. Try throwing it. Every single one is money to save the lady. Sure enough, the moment the lady was mentioned, he immediately fell silent. In the end he had no choice but to submit, bowing his head to let me pin the hairpin on. Unexpectedly, when I pinned the hairpin on his head, it actually suited him quite well. No wonder the village aunties all said he looked beautiful. He was the lady's blood brother, naturally inheriting her beauty. That night the hairpins were fought over until we sold out completely. Afterward, I needed even more. The village aunties all abandoned their farm work to help me make hairpins. But in the end, someone still couldn't tolerate our success. I asked the young master what deep grudge and great hatred this enemy had with him. The young master fell silent. He'd offended too many people. Even he didn't know who had come seeking revenge. If he weren't the lady's younger brother, I would have given up and left long ago. Wherever we went to sell, those thugs followed. We'd pushed our cart through every major and minor alley of Ningzhou. Many female customers were truly persistent. Often while we were selling, the enemies would arrive and I'd hurriedly push the cart and run. These female customers would also pick up their feet and chase after us, turning left and right. By the time we looked back, the thugs had been left behind while the female customers still cheerfully asked prices. How much is this? How much is that? The young master wasn't completely useless. Though his legs couldn't walk, his hands had some skill. He told me to collect a basket of small stones for him. Sitting sideways on the cart, with just a light flick of his wrist, he made those thugs cry out in misery. After beating them, he'd turn his head to look at me. His handsome face showed no expression, but I could see hints of smugness hiding in those bright eyes, exactly like the first lady's little dog back home begging to be petted. Though somewhat arrogant, at least it was more lively than his previous half-dead appearance lying in bed. After several days like this, we were finally cornered in an alley. Ethan, kneel down here, kowtow and call me grandfather, then eat all the rice in this dog bowl, and I'll spare this little servant girl. The speaker was none other than the eldest son of Finance Minister Reed. Lucas Reed. Previously his mother had come, and the lady had compensated nearly the entire family fortune. I thought everything was settled, but not only had he broken the young master's leg, he'd been continuously tailing us. I struggled hard, but someone gripped my arm until it hurt. Another thug held a blade against my face. The young master sat on the ground leaning against the cart, his face expressionless as he looked toward me. My heart suddenly clenched. The young master was a proud person. Even his own sister couldn't make him bow his head before. Now they wanted to make him kneel on the ground and eat like a dog. This absolutely couldn't happen. Even if the sky fell, my life would probably end here. To prevent him from opening his mouth to refuse and enraging them further, I quickly forced a fawning smile. Kind sir, I'm just a servant. How about I eat this bowl of rice in the young master's place, and we'll call the grudge settled between you all. After all, when I was little I competed with dogs for food, losing a bit of dignity to avoid getting my face slashed or losing my life. Truly not worth it. Wait. The young master spoke, his expression unchanged. Addressing Lucas, I'll kowtow for this. I stared wide-eyed, not daring to believe my ears. Lucas sniffed disdainfully and lifted his chin arrogantly. Then crawl over here like a dog and eat. I watched helplessly as the young master braced his hands on the ground and crawled forward step by step toward Lucas. On the stone pavement behind him, he left a trail of blood. Clearly his wounds had reopened. After so much struggle and hardship, that noble head, the head that even the lady's beatings couldn't make bow, now knocked against the ground. Each impact like a blow to my own heart. I should have been glad that at least we'd kept our lives, but somehow my chest felt suffocated and I couldn't breathe. If the lady hadn't met disaster, the young master would still be an elegant, jade-like young man. When displeased, he'd just toss silver at me. Not kneel before this worthless person to kowtow. Lucas stomped on the young master's shoulder and laughed arrogantly. Eat, dog. Hurry up and eat. Rice bestowed by your master. Don't you dare leave a single grain. The lackeys standing behind him looked at Ethan's body and cheered in approval. The sun had set. Only a dim glimmer of light remained in the alley. The young master knelt on the stone pavement, scooping rice with his hands. Lucas removed his foot from his shoulder, then stomped hard on the hand scooping rice. I told you to eat with your mouth. Have you ever seen a dog scoop rice with its hands? Ethan froze, not lifting his head, just staying bowed. Seeing him obey like a dog, Lucas laughed even more triumphantly, watching him swallow the rice gulp by gulp. He didn't chew. The rice entered his mouth and went straight down, then he'd bow his head for another mouthful. The people around began hurling insults at the young master. Let me tell you something, Ethan. I told your sister long ago that she goes out every single day. She's truly a wanton woman no one wants. Lucas's mother said, your sister, because of her excessive promiscuity, ended up imprisoned on death row. For the first time in my life, I felt the urge to kill someone. To kill this bastard. I laughed coldly. The others turned to look at me. No wonder my young master kicked you into the manure pit. With a mouth as foul as yours, isn't a manure pit exactly where you belong? Lucas's expression grew increasingly ugly. He kicked Ethan aside and advanced toward me. Don't touch her. Ethan shouted. A servant pressed him down to the ground. Lucas grabbed my chin. You're quite good at protecting your master. If you had any beauty I might have spared you. Bait her. Beat her hard for me. I dragged the cart forward, limping. My mouth and eyes were covered in bruises. The young master lay on the cart, covering his eyes with his hand, not saying a word, looking again like his half-dead self from before. When I'd just brought him back, reaching our small house, I carried him onto the bed. He closed his eyes. I dampened a cloth and carefully wiped his forehead, face, and hands clean, missing not a single spot. I thought perhaps once he was clean, he could temporarily forget the humiliation in that alley. Go apply some medicine. I'm fine. He turned his head away, his voice hoarse. In this poor place, where would there be medicine to apply? I carefully lay down on the pile of straw and sighed with relief. I miss the lady. I miss my older sister too. I miss the stinky tofu the lady made. After a moment, the young master chuckled softly. Then I have nothing left to miss. Every time they made that, the two of them would hide in the kitchen to eat it, never sharing even a bit with me. He sighed, his voice calm as he spoke. One dawn breaks tomorrow. You should go home. I'll remember your kindness. If someday I can save my sister, I'll definitely bring her to thank you properly. I bolted upright immediately, pulling on my wound until I had to grip my teeth and scrunch up my face from pain. If they won't let me sell during the day, I'll wait until everyone's asleep before going out to make a living. I refuse to believe that in a world this vast, there's no work to be found for me. Just after releasing those bold words, I suddenly remembered the young master had seemed to say something. I scratched my head awkwardly. Young master, what did you just say? I didn't hear clearly. After a long while, he finally answered in a low voice. Nothing. Just sleep. From that day on, I no longer set up stalls to sell during the day. I'd wait until the young master was fast asleep before sneaking out. There was no curfew in the city. Even late at night, you could still see drunken men with arms around each other's shoulders walking the streets. I carried a stick for self-defense. After wandering the city for 2 days, I unexpectedly discovered a business with multiplied profits. On the outskirts of Hua capital, there was a river of black, foul-smelling water that held all the waste from the city's residents. At night, waste collectors would gather from each household and push their carts to dump it into this river. And I would go buy that stuff. Though filthy waste stank terribly, it was excellent fertilizer for farmland. Outside Hua capital's walls, land wasn't scarce. Fields stretched endlessly. Why did I say this was a way to get rich? Because more people meant more waste meant more fertile soil, and more fertile soil meant abundant harvests. For this work, besides diligence, you just needed some physical strength, and I had both. After making my decision, I spent a large sum of money to buy 2 large wooden barrels. That very night I began entering the city to collect waste. Every household had a waste bucket outside their door. I went through every alley on the west side of the city, filling one barrel then pouring it into the other. It stank, truly stank, and was incredibly filthy. The smell was like burnt rice on a summer day, though honestly, compared to the stable master's foot odor I'd once smelled, this was even more horrific. When both barrels were full, I tied rope around my shoulders and strained to pull the cart, which came up to my shoulders. The sound of wheels grinding against stone rang out. I slowly pulled the cart back to the village. Before dawn broke, I'd already brought the waste barrels to sell to surrounding villages. When farmland has been cultivated for years, the soil becomes depleted of nutrients. Without fertilizer, neither grass nor crops can grow. In rural areas, human waste was more valuable than gold or silver. After one night's hard work, I sold a full cart of waste and earned 1 gun of coins. Gripping these coins in my hand, I felt both happy and worried. Happy because I'd earned some money. Worried because the ransom money for the lady was still far from enough, and if I kept running back and forth like this, I feared I'd collapse from exhaustion. If I wanted to expand this business, I needed to hire helpers. The village was far from the city. I needed to figure out how to collect, preserve, and quickly transport it to the fields. The moment I entered the house, I was already exhausted. I didn't expect the young master to still be awake, angrily scolding me. "Do you know what time it is? You're a woman. Aren't you afraid of encountering bad people wandering at night? Don't you know there are human traffickers who specialize in kidnapping young women like you?" The barrage of questions left me stunned. From childhood until now, aside from mother and the lady, no one had ever cared about me this much. I also wasn't used to explaining my whereabouts to anyone. Moreover, the young master had never cared where I went before. Why was he suddenly so angry now? "Did you soil your pants again?" I approached, about to lift his blanket, but suddenly remembered I hadn't washed my hands yet. I quickly ran out to the courtyard, carried water, and washed thoroughly. The young master, who'd been cold-faced, suddenly moved closer and asked, "Why does your body have such a strange smell?" So I enthusiastically shared with him my new nighttime waste collection business. His expression shifted from cold to shocked, and finally his face changed colors continuously. "If you do this work, people will look down on you in the future. It'll be hard for you to marry." I continued tidying the table while nodding. "Who needs to marry? Isn't earning money harder? You're just a servant girl from Morgan Manor. Even if you don't do this work and leave, no one would blame you for it." The young master's voice carried a hint of bitterness as he slowly said, "Why would you say it doesn't concern me? I'm doing what I want to do. For someone I love, what's wrong with that? The lady is the person I cherish most in this world. Working for her, I'm willing and content. Don't even mention collecting waste. If I had to eat waste for her sake, I'd let that go without complaint too." I waited and waited, but he didn't respond. When I turned to look, I saw him with his head bowed in contemplation, his ears and neck flushed red. I panicked and rushed to touch him. Last time after the medical examination, he'd stabilized. Don't tell me he was running a fever again. He quickly waved his hand to stop me, uncomfortably covering his mouth and coughing lightly once. After a moment, he asked, "Don't you think this weather looks like rain?" I nodded. "The air is stifling. Black clouds cover the sky. It does look like rain. Come with me somewhere." "Young master, what are you going to the Grand Secretary's manor for?" He didn't explain, just told me to carry him down to the cart and help him to the grand entrance of the Grand Secretary's manor. Suddenly, he knelt down right there in the middle of the road. I nearly cursed out loud. His knees had just barely healed. Why was he kneeling down again like this? "You go back first. Come pick me up tomorrow morning." He tried his best to keep his back straight, his face full of determination, his gaze fixed forward. "I'm not leaving. I'll just pull the cart farther away." Standing across from him watching, the street bustled with passers-by. Occasionally a few people would walk past, casting curious glances his way. Before long, the sky began sprinkling rain. The passers-by hurriedly covered their heads with their hands, rushing to find shelter from the rain. Only the young master remained kneeling in the rain. The grand gate of the Grand Secretary's manor stayed tightly shut. No one poked their head out to inquire. The rain grew heavier and heavier. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Rainwater pooled around where the young master knelt. In the puddles, bloodstains faintly appeared, spreading outward. Clearly he couldn't hold on much longer. How could his knees endure this? Kneeling for so long. I struggled to restrain myself from running over to pull him up. Perhaps he had deep reasons for doing this. I thought perhaps it was for the lady's sake. The sky gradually darkened. The rain alternated between heavy and light, but never stopped. Several hours passed. The young master no longer had the strength to keep himself kneeling upright. His hands dropped down in front of his knees. Only his neck and head stubbornly strained to stay straight. He knelt through the entire night, and I also stood watching from afar through the entire night. The next morning, the grand gate of the Grand Secretary's manor opened. A young servant boy poked his head out. "The young master Grand Secretary invites you in." I quickly shook my legs to stand, rubbed my stiff, numb legs, then ran over. The young master looked at the hand I extended, his eyes flashing with surprise. "You're still here." His voice was hoarse and dry. I squatted down in front of the young master, turned my head and smiled. "The young master is here. Where else would this servant go?" That day I sat waiting in the outer room until late at night. When I saw the young master emerge, his eyes seemed somewhat brighter than before. My waste collection enterprise had just begun when it encountered trouble. I calculated that I'd collect each barrel for 50 wen, gather it over several days, then transport it to nearby villages to sell. But the problem was that storing waste for long periods could reduce its effectiveness. One day, as I squatted in the courtyard, unloading waste barrels from the cart, old Watson walked past carrying his shoulder pole and casually remarked, "Child, using too much fresh manure will harm the rice crops." Only then did I learn that fresh waste had to be properly composted in compost fertilizer before it could be used in the fields. Otherwise it would burn and wither the rice seedlings. So I began asking around, from old Watson to other village elders, investigating throughout the village. Finally I found old Lambert, who knew how to process fresh waste. Normally, to let waste decompose naturally, people would just dig pits at the field's edge and compost it for over half a year before it could be used. But time wouldn't wait for me. I needed to find a faster method to decompose the waste. So old Lambert and I rolled around in the fields for several days. Finally we figured out a method. We'd pour the waste into pits and add animal bones. Then I'd take some sun-dried soil, add burned golden goose grass, yellow mugwort, and thorny licorice ash, then mix it all together. This method greatly shortened the composting time, and the finished product was also much easier to transport. Collecting each barrel for 50 wen. Word of this spread very quickly. From one telling 10, from 10 telling 100. In no time at all. By late evening the roads and refugee village were packed with carts loaded full of waste barrels. Recently the young master no longer demanded to go outside. He just shut himself in his room all day writing and drawing. Who knows what he was plotting? The rare times he'd emerge from those tasks were to complain about the waste barrels. He said the courtyard was full of the smell of manure. He didn't even dare open the windows. Though he still kept a cold expression, his voice carried a hint of resentment. I admitted my thinking hadn't been thorough. All the other houses in the refugee village grew flowers and grass, fragrant and intoxicating. Only our house was stacked full of waste barrels with flies buzzing everywhere. Even dogs wouldn't bother walking past. The next day, I decided to rent a plot of land on the mountain behind the village, specifically for storing the waste barrels. In the middle of the night, "Where are you going?" The young master sat on the wooden cart, looking bewildered. "You'll know when we get there." I tightened the rope across my shoulders and quickened my pace. The cart stopped in front of Minister Reed's manor. Beside it sat over a dozen waste barrels. "Big sister, all the waste collected tonight is here." Little Harvey, the orphan boy from the refugee village, was quick and diligent. When he heard I was collecting waste, he was the most enthusiastic responder. Every night he could haul back several cartloads for me. I rotated my wrists, looked at the young master with a triumphant smile. "Watch closely. I'll help you get revenge. I waved my hand, signaling little Harvey and the village children who followed me in collecting waste to advance. They began tipping over the wooden barrels. The sound of liquid pouring down continuously rang out, accompanied by an intensely sour, putrid stench rising up. The young master frowned and covered his nose. He held on for a while, but in the end couldn't take it and dry heaved. I stood beside him in amazement. When had I, the person who used to nearly faint just from smelling the stable master's foot odor, become completely unaffected by this terrible smell? After finishing the job, little Harvey, the village kids, and I stood admiring our handiwork. In front of the Reed family manor, the stone lion statues and plaques were all smeared with filthy mud. The 2 carriages parked nearby also dripped dirty water drop by drop onto the ground. As for the manor entrance, needless to say, it was covered with a large puddle. I guarantee tomorrow they won't find a single clean place to step. Big sister, what I had left over, I had someone climb the wall and dump it all into the inner courtyard. I nodded and turned to look at the young master with a smug grin. Who knew he wouldn't even glance? He just kept covering his nose and dry heaving. Looking at him seemingly about to faint, this young master truly was a useless man. The next morning, the entire minister's manor woke to a strange odor. The gate guard yawned and opened the door, rubbed his eyes a few times, then screamed in horror. In the back garden, a young maid went out early to pick vegetables for her mistress. Not knowing what she stepped in, she looked down and also screamed in horror. The minister's wife was served by her maids. She frowned sternly, scolding the servants for being careless in their work. The moment she stepped out the door, with just one glance she fainted dead away, her upper body falling straight into a puddle of waste. Around noon, Lucas Reed slowly woke up. Hearing that his home had been invaded by waste dumpers, his anger blazed. Planning to go to the pleasure quarter to cool off, a young servant untied the saddle rope. He didn't bother looking, just lifted the curtain and stepped into the carriage, then immediately screamed in horror. That day, all the neighbors discussed it animatedly, unable to understand why screams kept echoing from the minister's manor, accompanied by an indescribable odor. The young master's legs recovered very quickly. After a month in bed, his left leg could now touch the ground and bear weight. Though his right leg was still more serious and couldn't yet exert force, he could already use a wooden crutch to walk around. In the hot summer, the young master wore only thin undergarments, leaning on his crutch as he walked. This caused quite a few young ladies in the village to grow curious, frequently poking their heads out to peek. The most beautiful young lady in the village, Angela, often came to chat with me, though clearly her intentions didn't lie in conversation. Her eyes practically glued themselves to young master. Strangely enough, the person who used to use books to swat mosquitoes now held books and read them day and night. If the lady knew about this, she'd probably fear the young master had been possessed by a scholar's ghost. Though I hadn't yet earned 500 taels, every month I still brought some wine and meat to the prison, wrapped a bit of money to slip to the guards, just hoping they'd treat the lady and Lord Felix kindly in the cells. You can earn this much money just from collecting waste? The young master asked in surprise while practicing walking and looking at the pile of silver on the bed. Of course. I nodded proudly. Among all the trades at the market, everyone competed for business. Only the waste collection trade was looked down upon. But that also meant I could monopolize the market. People had to excrete waste every day, guaranteeing an endless supply. And farmers always needed fertilizer. No worry about lacking customers. If I couldn't make money, who could? People really shouldn't be too complacent. That night, a gang came to compete for territory and the waste collection business with me. The leader was a large fellow, but his speech was stuttering. This area belongs to us. If you want to collect waste here, you have to pay a fee. I knew this guy. He wasn't originally from Hua Capital. As a child he'd been kidnapped by human traffickers, lived in a ruined temple on the south side of the city, growing up on scraps and leftovers from the common folk. Before entering this trade I'd investigated thoroughly. They usually only operated on the south side, rarely setting foot in the west, which is why I started here. Now they'd hauled their carts over, clearly trying to claim this territory. Tell me to pay them. Never, but giving him a ladle of waste, that I could consider. That night I became famous in one battle. Many years later, the streets still told tales of a peculiar woman. She was called the Waste Lady, famous for her cold temperament and saying little but doing much. Anyone who angered her would experience what it felt like to bathe 3 days and still not wash away the smell, returning home filthy from head to toe. Naturally, I got scolded by the young master again for making a scene. The young master, like the lady, loved cleanliness and normally liked washing his hands 100 times a day. I lowered my head silently, walked to the well, and drew water to wash my hair. Well water at night was very cold. I shivered as I used the wooden ladle to scoop water. Are you stupid or what? Going to wash your hair with cold water at night? I don't know when the young master had hobbled out on his crutch, his voice stern and emotionless. The young master carried a basin of hot water out from the kitchen. Not using his crutch made his steps even slower. His sleeves were rolled up, revealing his strong, firm arms. I squatted down on the ground, head bowed. The young master took the ladle from my hand, mixed the hot and cold water together, then ladled it over my hair scoop by scoop. I was so alarmed I nearly tumbled into the basin. How could I dare let the inn-master wash a servant's hair? I spoke up weakly, my hand trembling. The young master didn't stop. His tone wasn't pleasant. If you dare go collect waste, what else wouldn't you dare? I think you're the most reckless woman in this entire world. I forced an awkward smile, timidly shifting to one side, fearing my dirty hair would make the young master uncomfortable. Who knew that right after, my arm was yanked forcefully. My entire body fell against the young master. Clearly we'd fallen on hard times, forced to live in this crumbling thatched house, yet the young master's body still carried a faint, clean fragrance. The young master coughed lightly once, seeming uncomfortable. Then his hands began smoothing out my tangled hair. Afterward, we had to boil 2 pots of water before we could wash all the mud off my body. Only then did I suddenly realize I didn't know if the young master's cleanliness obsession had recovered. Previously, just from Widow Anderson touching his hand once, the young master had to wipe his hands for half a day. But now he could touch my filthy hair. How strange. My fertilizer business grew increasingly prosperous. The villagers also began working with me. Hua capital governed 20 counties. It took me a whole month to travel everywhere. In each county I appointed someone to collect waste and bring it back to sell. Every day, waste collectors would deliver to my village. Then the villagers and I would compost the waste before selling it to counties and villages that came to buy. I profited from being the middleman. Calculating it out, each month I earned over 100 taels after deducting wages paid to the villagers. Over 80 taels remained. The 500 taels was just a matter of time. Only the neighboring counties had limited farmland. With 3 harvests a year, demand for fertilizer would decrease. I'd already considered expanding to more distant regions. The lady once told me that the southern lands were fertile with abundant rice crops. Where grain production was high, demand for fertilizer would be great too. So I pushed the young master to the riverbank to inspect a boat for transporting waste. We happened to encounter the emperor making his southern inspection tour. We stood by the roadside to watch the imperial procession. It was extraordinarily grand. 36 royal carriages led the way, followed by an endless entourage. Rumors said the current emperor was originally the prince with the least expectations placed on him. He'd ascended the throne through scheming. Others said he only knew pleasure, seeking, and didn't attend to state affairs. Despite people's resentment everywhere, the procession drew closer and closer. A gust of wind blew, causing the silk curtain to flutter slightly. In just that instant before the curtain fell, I saw the lady I'd been longing for day and night, wearing magnificent golden robes. Sitting beside the emperor, the lady wore elaborate ornaments on her head. Gold and silver jingled gently with each step. But her pure, immortal, like air from before had vanished, replaced by a worldly, enchanting beauty. In that brief moment, I clearly saw her cold face, her soulless eyes no different from dead water without a single ripple. I quickly covered my mouth with my hand, afraid I couldn't control myself and would cry out. The young master also saw clearly. His eyes turned cold as ice, his hands clenched white. I heard a cracking sound. He'd snapped off a piece of the wooden cart's railing. When the procession gradually disappeared around the street corner, I quietly spoke. Young master, I fear even 500 taels would be useless now. I thought the lady had been imprisoned in death row. Who knew she'd actually been locked in the harem of that fake emperor? An imperial sovereign actually dared to forcibly seize a subject's wife. It seems Lord Felix's embezzlement charges were also orchestrated by this emperor. The lady loved freedom like a bird in the sky or a fish in water. Now she's imprisoned like a bird in a gilded cage. I fear she suffers even more than death. On the way home, the young master and I both remained silent, neither saying a word. Only after entering the house did I speak up. What should we do about Lord Felix? Under the flickering candlelight, half the young master's face was shrouded in shadow, making it hard to see clearly. The two of them have deep affection. My sister has a strong character. She hasn't taken her own life yet, because she wants to preserve his safety. You don't need to keep bringing money to the prison anymore. As long as my sister remains in the harem, he'll be safe and sound. My head felt like a tangled mess. I'd always thought that if I worked hard earning money each day, sooner or later I could ransom the lady out. But now the lady was imprisoned in the unreachable Forbidden Palace. I had no power, no influence. What could I possibly do? Suddenly I felt something lightly touch my head. Looking up, I saw the young master had sat down beside me, his hand gently stroking my hair. When I raised my head to look at him, he quickly withdrew his hand, seeming uncomfortable. You must be hungry. Let me cook noodles for you. His voice was gentle and warm, completely different from usual. Then he limped toward the kitchen. Since the day I entered Morgan Manor until now, I'd never seen the young master enter the kitchen. My emotions in turmoil, I just followed him without thinking. The young master's figure was tall and large. His hands rested casually on the stove's edge. His hands were covered with wood dust and sticky flour. He bent his head to look into the pot, his expression calm and natural. But when I looked into the pot, I saw the water filling it to the brim, while white flour floated in clumps on the water's surface. Did he think the noodles would knead themselves in the pot? I sighed softly. Let me do it. The young master turned to look at me, his eyes showing a hint of awkwardness under the flickering firelight from the stove. I pushed him aside, poured out the water from the pot, then ladled in 2 fresh scoops of water before beginning to knead the dough. Though I'd earned some money by now, because I didn't pay attention to food and drink, there wasn't a scrap of meat in the house. After thinking for a bit, I could only go next door to pick a few stalks of green vegetables. When the noodles were done, I turned around only to bump into a wall of flesh. I'd turned too quickly, my forehead smacking into his chin. The young master was tall, even not fully straightened up. He was already a head taller than me. A familiar fragrance drifted around, making me involuntarily wonder, did I smell bad? Spending all day around fertilizer, could the stench have seeped into my body without me realizing? I was busy pondering the smell issue, not noticing the young master still hadn't moved aside, just standing there blocking me. When I was about to push him away, I suddenly heard him cry out. Then his whole body collapsed against me. I clumsily caught the young master, thinking surely his old injuries hadn't flared up again. He wrapped his arms around me, his head resting on my shoulder, his hot breath tickling my neck. His voice moaned softly by my ear, full of grievance. My leg hurts so much. Suddenly I have no strength at all. Hadn't it nearly healed? Why did it relapse again? Worried, I wanted to carry him inside. The young master tightened his embrace, burying his head even deeper into my neck. It hurts terribly. Don't move. My leg has a cramp. Let me rest a moment. His voice sounded like he was trying to endure pain. I had no choice but to obediently stand still, waiting for the young master's pain to pass. But I waited and waited. Nearly half an hour passed and he still leaned against me. The young master was too heavy. His entire body weight pressed down until my legs nearly went numb. The water in the pot boiled over. I tilted my head to glance at the noodle pot and asked, "Does it still hurt? I need to fish out the noodles." The moment I spoke and turned, everything before my eyes went dark. A soft, warm sensation briefly touched my lips. Then the young master released me and stood up straight, his eyes slightly reddened. I looked at him in surprise. Did it hurt that much? We sat in the courtyard under the moonlight, sharing a bowl of plain, tasteless vegetarian noodles. The next day, when dawn had just broken and I woke up, the young master was already gone from the bed. He'd only left behind a piece of paper with a few lines of writing. No need to continue getting involved in this matter. I'll save those to myself. Thank you for your care. If we meet again someday, I'll definitely repay your life-saving grace. From that day on, I never saw little Ethan again. Without the goal of earning 500 taels anymore, I suddenly felt directionless. I didn't know what I should do, nor what I could still do. This entire refugee village should have been renamed Fertilizer Village instead. Because nearly everyone in the village was helping me manage this business. Every day I still woke before dawn broke, then worked until late at night before returning to my room to rest. But I always felt something was missing, as if life had lost a familiar part. The books little Ethan had read, the writing brush he'd used, still lay on the table. Interestingly, that brush had been made from pig bristles by a village auntie for him. Beside the bed were many small trinkets. A fragrance pouch Widow Anderson had given, gloves from Angela, and several dried leaves given by old Watson's little granddaughter. The little girl, not yet old enough to call her parents properly, already knew to cling to little Ethan's legs calling, "Big brother." There was also a hoe given by several uncles in the village. Seeing Widow Anderson frequently visiting the young master, when they learned about it, they came together to his house threatening him, saying his shoulders couldn't carry loads, his hands couldn't lift things, calling him a pretty boy. Before leaving, they left behind the hoe, challenging him to come to the fields the next day to compete. At the time, the young master's face showed no expression, saying nothing. I thought he didn't care, but unexpectedly, the next morning I caught him secretly practicing with the hoe in the back garden. Such a shame I didn't get to see him actually plowing the fields. It would have been hilarious. Though my mind wandered, my body was used to constant labor, earning money without rest. A few days later, I fell ill. Exhausted, I packed a small bag of luggage and took an ox cart back to my hometown. It was actually quite laughable. Two women who'd fought for half their lives, Mother and the First Lady, were now cooperating because of Father's new young concubine. However, their target wasn't that young concubine but Father himself, that heartless man. Now I understood clearly, as long as men lived, their terrible hearts would never change. Mother seemed to have gained a bit of weight. Though still somewhat subservient before the First Lady, surprisingly they could sit at the same table, nibbling melon seeds without arguing. I'd returned intending to take Mother away, but she just sighed once. "Mother is old now. I've lived my entire life in this house. My roots are all here. I can't go anywhere else." The First Lady isn't as hateful as before. Though her face still frowns, at least she doesn't deprive your mother of food and clothing. Sometimes she even warms wine and pulls me to sit together, cursing your father. In this life, Mother hopes for nothing more than for you to live well. Mother had several gray hairs now. Each time she smiled, small wrinkles appeared at the corners of her eyes. I asked Mother if I no longer have a goal. What should I do? Mother was hanging clothes to dry, her hands patting lightly on the fabric. She spoke with complete unconcern. "Child, you've read too many books, that's why you think so much. People live just for a few scraps of silver, to eat a good meal, to drink a fragrant cup of wine. Don't think random thoughts. Living itself is already a purpose." I stayed home recovering for several days. When I arrived I had only one small bundle. When I left I had 3 in my hands. One of them even contained a bag of pastries the First Lady gave me. Truly the sun had risen in the west. Returning to the village, I saw many uncles and aunties waiting at my courtyard gate. Only then did I slap my forehead, remembering I'd forgotten to pay this month's wages. Looking at the long line of people waiting to receive money, my heart gradually welled up with renewed vitality. Even Mother and the First Lady, sworn enemies who couldn't share the same sky, could resolve their grudges and live in harmony. Though palace walls might be high, who knows? Perhaps one day I'd become so wealthy that even the emperor would have to respect me 3 parts. As long as the lady lived, there was hope. Her survival was my purpose. Mother was right. Just do well what's before you, advance step by step, forever moving forward. In the 30th year of the Yongyuan era, barbarian tribes from the north continuously invaded. The current emperor was weak, seeking peace and paying tribute. So I expanded the fertilizer business southward, beginning waste transport by boat. From then on, many waste boats traveled back and forth on the southern and northern waterways. In the 34th year of Yongyuan, I thought of trading in horse manure. The Great Qing army had hundreds of thousands of war horses. Horse manure at military camps piled into mountains. I spent a large sum greasing the palms of officials in the Horse Administration Bureau, reaping profits of 100 zalzen taels annually. That same year, Mother urged me about marriage matters. I immediately declined. In the 36th year of Yongyuan, the north suffered drought and food shortages. I immediately transported rice from the south to the north, from which I expanded a series of grain shops. Mother once again urged marriage matters. I declined again. In the 38th year of Yongyuan, I tried my hand at maritime trade, raw silk and tea leaves exchanged for pearls and agate, profiting from price arbitrage. After several years of trading, thinking back, that first chest of gold I earned was truly the most difficult. Once you have money, money begets money much more smoothly. All these years I never saw the lady again, nor did I see little Ethan. Strangely, every year I'd receive a pouch of silver. When I woke, it would already be placed by my pillow with a note inside reading, "All is well. Don't worry." The handwriting was clear like Ethan's, messy but vigorous. This person was truly strange. It's not like I ever thought about him. I just didn't understand why he kept coming and going in such a hurry, never willing to meet me even once so I could ask about the lady's situation. I no longer lived in the refugee village. I'd load everyone to move into the city. Border warfare remained tense, but Hua capital remained bustling and peaceful. Only the court, year after year, extorted silver from common people and merchants for tribute payments, making everyone suffer restlessly. The barbarian tribes split their forces in two. One route attacked head-on, the other crossed the river advancing straight southward, threatening Hua capital. I'd thought paying tribute was the emperor's final act of weakness. Who knew he could broaden people's perspectives even more? Abandoning the city and fleeing the capital. The garrison troops numbered only a few thousand. Inside the city remained only the elderly and children. Everywhere echoed sounds of weeping. Though the garrison soldiers were young, seeing the elderly and children behind them, they gritted their teeth and continued fighting. The barbarian forces approaching Hua capital numbered only 10,000 troops, but every single one was brave and skilled in battle. Not something ordinary people could stop. On the first day, the garrison troops dropped stones from atop the city gates to prevent enemy soldiers from climbing ladders. Before long, the stones ran out. On the second day, I had little Harvey summon workers to collect all the waste in the city. Then we borrowed over a dozen large pots everywhere, lit fires to boil the waste water, then carried waste barrels up to the city gates to pour down. The miserable screams outside echoed everywhere. I stood atop the city wall looking down. Seeing enemy soldiers lying flat on the ground vomiting, their morale collapsed. On the third day, the waste in the city had run out. Everyone in the city panicked anxiously. We thought we'd run out of options and could only wait for death under the enemy's blades. But on the third night, outside suddenly rang out sounds of slaughter. I stood up to look into the distance, seeing a small troop charge straight in from afar, like a blade piercing through the enemy's battle formation. Before long, another troop provided reinforcement. The two forces joined together to encircle them. In just one night they'd slaughtered clean all the enemy troops outside the city gates. When the city gates opened, dawn had just broken. A troop surged in, the smell of blood mixing with the stench. The people in the city stood on both sides of the road to welcome them, everyone's faces showing joy at surviving the calamity. The leader wore silver armor, riding atop a tall warhorse. One hand gripped the reins, the other held a silver spear still dripping with blood. A guard beside him held high a torch. The flickering firelight illuminated half his face in light, half in shadow. He had thick, sword-like eyebrows, tightly pressed lips, a sharp chin. A scar at his brow added even more to his cold, fierce air. He swept his gaze around, his deep voice ringing out, "This general is Ethan, following Prince Nathaniel's orders to provide relief. Everyone can rest assured now." I stared at him in a daze. I don't know when those deep eyes also began looking back at me. Our four eyes met. Only after a long while did I snap back to awareness. Little Ethan, no, now he was General Ethan, had changed so tremendously. Hua capital returned to its former prosperity. Only the one in power had changed from the emperor to General Shah. 8 years ago when he left, he still retained some of a youth's proud spirit. Now returning, his appearance had grown even colder. His entire bearing radiating an iron aura of slaughter. That day I'd spotted him from afar in the crowd, then he immediately rode his horse straight into the palace. I meanwhile was busy with countless matters requiring decisions. My business grew larger and larger, those under my command increased daily, leaving me no time to think about anything else. The next meeting came a month after Prince Nathaniel entered the city. He followed close behind. Several days later, Prince Nathaniel summoned me to the palace. He rode his horse escorting my carriage the entire journey. These recent years my temperament had calmed somewhat. Though my heart felt uneasy, outwardly I maintained composure. Entering the palace, I walked shoulder to shoulder with him beside these towering palace walls. I couldn't help feeling moved. These palace walls, these blue stone slabs. Surely these were places the lady had once walked past and seen. Never did I imagine I'd one day enter the forbidden palace myself. Even less did I imagine the lady was no longer there. I was still immersed in thought when I suddenly startled in alarm hearing him say something that made me lose all composure. He said, "Prince Nathaniel intends to take you as a consort." His voice was cold, as if what he'd just said was no different from commenting on today's reign. I was furious beyond measure. Such important news, yet he waited until we reached the palace entrance to tell me. I clearly remembered 8 years ago he'd said he'd repay his life, saving debt. Was this his way of repaying it? He stood with straight back, his gaze still fixed straight ahead without the slightest wavering. "If you don't want this, I have a way." I quickly moved closer, lowering my voice. "Speak quickly. We're about to reach the hall." He looked down at me, his deep eyes flashing with an indistinct light. "We are childhood sweethearts who have long privately pledged our lifelong commitment." I thought he was joking, but his expression was completely serious, without any emotion. My heart suddenly went into turmoil. One foot had already crossed the threshold of the Great Hall. Prince Nathaniel looked about 30 years old. His appearance couldn't match Ethan's, but his bearing was extraordinary, his features majestic, radiating an emperor's aura. He sat on high. Even from afar, one could sense his regal presence. "I had General Shaw bring you to the palace to meet an exceptional woman who could devise a method using waste water to defend the city." I knelt in the inner hall, head bowed low, not daring to answer. "I heard you started your business from waste collection, and are now a wealthy household with grain stores spread throughout North and South." "Your Highness, those rumors are mostly exaggerations not conforming to truth." Prince Nathaniel stood up, stepped down from the high platform, bent down and extended his hand, seemingly wanting to help me stand. I was terrified, quickly kowtowed, then rolled to stand up myself. He laughed heartily. "Interesting, very interesting. Tell me, which parts aren't true?" I answered solemnly. This common woman indeed started from waste collection, but that work only earned scraps of silver. After many years of hard work, I've only managed to open a few grain shops. Ethan stood to one side, eyes looking straight ahead, seemingly not paying the slightest attention to our conversation. Prince Nathaniel looked out the window. After a moment he turned back to look at me and said, "I intend to take you as a consort, do you agree?" I startled, immediately kowtowing. "Prince Nathaniel is noble and exalted. This humble woman is merely a waste collector. How dare I defile you?" Prince Nathaniel looked at me, his expression gradually darkening. My heart panicked. Suddenly remembering Ethan's words, I decided to first employ a delaying tactic. "This humble woman and General Shaw have been childhood sweethearts since young, long privately pledged our lifelong commitment. Both parties are willing." At this point, Ethan finally could no longer pretend. He stepped forward to kneel beside me and kowtowed once. "Your Highness, years ago on the road returning from the frontier, you once asked this subject if he had any wishes, if there was any young lady in his heart. You said you would arrange a marriage for him." He looked toward me, grasped my hand tightly, our fingers intertwining, then pulled me to kneel and kowtow together. "This is the young lady in my heart. I beg your Highness to grant us marriage and fulfill my heart's desire." I remained in the kneeling position, tilting my head to glare at him. How did it become begging for a marriage decree? He also glanced at me with a challenging look, as if saying, "Go ahead and refuse if you dare." Prince Nathaniel showed no expression, said nothing more, only permitted us to withdraw. Once we exited the hall, I realized my back was soaked with sweat. The moment we left the palace gate, I couldn't hold back and kicked Ethan. "Marriage decree." He raised his eyebrows. I used the life-saving debt from 8 years ago to pressure him into granting the marriage. Otherwise, did you think he'd let it go so easily? I fell silent. "But I'm no beauty, and my family has no power. Why would he marry me?" He smirked, though his eyes remained cold. "Isn't it because he's taken a fancy to your assets? You think he doesn't know how much grain you've stockpiled in the north and south? Prince Nathaniel wants to seize the realm." Troops and horses need provisions. Military campaigns need silver. In his eyes, you're a commercial genius. Why would he pass up the chance to bring you under his command? I hesitated. Bring me under his command. Taking me as a concubine counts as bringing me under his command. Why not invite me to be an advisor properly? Ethan lowered his head and chuckled softly. In the world's eyes, women will marry sooner or later. Once married, their assets naturally belong to their husband's household. If he takes you as a consort and uses his own consort's money, no one would dare speak out. But if one day you marry someone else and he wants to get his hands on your grain, he'd earn a bad reputation. Prince Nathaniel values his honor. He certainly won't act thoughtlessly and damage his own reputation. The court is treacherous, people's hearts hard to fathom. In no time, we'd arrived at my manor. He brazenly followed me into the courtyard. Why are you following me? He pretended to clutch his chest in pain, putting on a suffering expression. I offended Prince Nathaniel for your sake. After using me, you immediately want to drive me away. Fine, I misjudged you. I thought this fellow had grown up and matured. Who knew he's still the same mischievous monkey as before? From that day, he only brought one bundle of luggage and one long spear, brazenly moving into the manor. His excuse sounded quite good. If we're putting on a play, we must see it through. The reunion with Lord Felix came one afternoon. Ethan had petitioned Prince Nathaniel to reopen the embezzlement case. A month later, the results were announced throughout the realm, shocking people's hearts. That year, the court allocated over 1 million taels for disaster relief, but officials at all levels conspired together. From high officials to low, all took the opportunity to line their pockets, seizing relief silver and grain. Officials at every level embezzled and skimmed. In the end, little silver reached the disaster victims. The most despicable thing was that not only did the emperor know about this, he was the one who swallowed the largest portion of that silver. The emperor was arrogant and extravagant, craving fame. He claimed to relieve the people so they'd thank his benevolence, but didn't want to actually spend money on disaster victims. Therefore, he and the finance minister devised this vicious scheme. As for Lord Felix, he was an orphan from a poor family, raised on charity, who studied by lamplight for 10 years before achieving success. His heart was full of aspirations to serve the people. But because of this relief operation, he became the only one who didn't embezzle, yet was pushed forward to take the blame. Calamity struck the lady for no reason, only because during one of the emperor's incognito travels, he happened to glimpse the lady's extraordinary beauty. The emperor couldn't stop thinking about his subject's wife. The finance minister guessed the emperor's intentions and finally presented this sinister scheme. Killing 2 birds with 1 stone by having someone take the blame while smoothly bringing Lady Morgan into the harem. When I learned the truth, I made a straw effigy with the dog emperor's name written on it, and placed it in my room to beat daily, cursing him. Lord Felix was personally escorted into the manor by Ethan. I stood waiting at the entrance. From afar, seeing the carriage approach, I quickly turned to tell the servants beside me, "Open the gate and prepare wine and wormwood for me." The carriage stopped. I saw only Ethan step down, his expression somber. He glanced at me once, then helped someone down. I didn't understand what was happening. Lord Felix's release from prison was a joyous occasion. Why did he wear such a gloomy expression? When the carriage curtain was lifted and he extended his hand to carefully help someone down, only then did I understand why he looked that way. I still clearly remembered the first time I met Lord Felix. He'd astonished me so. Hair black as ink, features exquisite, wearing robes white as moonlight. In a flash capturing everyone's gaze. Back then I was young and naive, hiding behind the lady, thinking I'd met an immortal. I heard someone say our household had a little golden ox who only knew to work with her head down. Lord Felix bent down, gently patted my head, his eyes warm and gentle. But now, the person before me bore no trace of his former self. Those beautiful eyes had sunken deep, their light extinguished. The black hair once worn high in a topknot had turned completely white. I was so alarmed I covered my mouth with my hand, my eyes burning hot. This world had been so unjust to him. That dog emperor deserved death. The finance minister deserved death. They all deserved to be cut into 10,000 pieces. Such a good person, yet they'd tormented him to this state. I didn't dare say much, quickly grabbed the wormwood, dipped it in water to ward off evil spirits for Lord Felix, then together with Ethan Shaw helped him step over the brazier. I intended to ask Lord Felix what he wanted to eat so I could have it prepared, but Ethan glanced at me and shook his head slightly. After escorting Lord Felix to his room to rest, he pulled me into the garden. Only after a long while did he struggle to open his mouth. My brother-in-law now cannot speak with his mouth or write with his hands. I didn't dare think deeply, didn't dare imagine what Lord Felix had endured to become so pitiable. Though Ethan was now even busier than I, living in the same manor. Throughout the day he came and went, yet not once did I catch sight of him. I found a careful and clever young servant to care for Lord Felix, then invited a physician to treat him. After examining him, the physician only shook his head saying, "He's suffered excessive depletion. However many more years he lives is a blessing." Then he prescribed some tonic medicines. Spring came once more. Prince Nathaniel issued a proclamation throughout the realm. Its words were sharp as blades, its spirit resounding. The text exposed dozens of crimes that Emperor Theodore had committed since ascending the throne, also pointing out clearly that he'd murdered the previous emperor, altered the imperial will, and usurped the throne unjustly. Now in Hua capital, even street children could sing a few lines cursing Theodore. Before Ethan departed for campaign, I came to see him off. He sat atop his tall warhorse, still wearing that silver armor. His scarlet cloak billowed in the wind. I looked up and asked him, "How do you plan to save the lady?" He raised his eyebrows, smiling faintly. "Overturn this entire realm perhaps." I nodded. "Then overturn the entire realm." After he left, Prince Nathaniel once again summoned me to the palace, for no other reason than wanting me to set an example by donating grain and assets. After hearing this, I didn't hesitate at all. Clasping my hands, I said, "To share worries for your highness is this common woman's fortune." When troops march to war, the court pressuring merchants to donate grain and silver is normal. It's just a matter of whether I proactively offer or have my assets forcibly seized. Either way I must give. Might as well I volunteer to preserve his dignity. Moreover, for the lady's sake and Ethan's sake, I'm also willing and content. Leaving the palace, I immediately summoned little Harvey and Charles, telling them to go south to mobilize grain. These two had followed me since my humble beginnings, long since becoming my right-hand men. Charles asked in surprise, "Boss, what do you need so much grain for?" I said irritably, "To feed pigs, is that acceptable?" In the 40th year of Yongyuan, Ningzhou capital fell. General Ethan directly took Theodore's head to sacrifice to the heroic spirits. The Yongyuan era name was changed to Zhanyuan. In the 3rd month, spring breezes blew gently. The day I met the lady again felt like a lifetime had passed. She wore white robes, walking toward me from afar. My eyes gradually blurred until I couldn't see clearly. Everything felt like a dream, until I heard her say, "Daisy, all these years you've suffered." I burst into tears, kneeling before the lady, clutching her legs and sobbing, as if all the grievances and hardships of all these years poured out with my tears. The lady sat down, embracing me in her arms, gently patting my back. "My lady, you don't know how much I've missed you." I cried until I couldn't catch my breath. It took a long time before I could finish speaking. The moment the lady opened her mouth, she also couldn't hold back and burst into sobs. Only then did I realize she was crying even more than I was. I clumsily wiped her tears with my hand. The lady's eyes now had a few wrinkles. When I grasped her hand, I saw scars crisscrossing her wrists. My heart ached unbearably. My lady, the most beautiful person in the world, had nearly failed to survive this ordeal. Fortunately, we were both still alive, still living to wait for each other. We just held each other crying for a very long time, until a detestable person pulled me up. "Older sister, I still need to see my brother-in-law. Don't obstruct her." Only then did I remember that the lady and Lord Felix had also been separated for over 10 years. I quickly helped the lady stand, wiped away tears, then grinned broadly. "My lady, let me take you to see Lord Felix." Before I could turn around, Ethan had already pulled over a young servant. "Older sister, he'll take you there." Then he forcefully pulled me into his room. I thought he had some important matter about provisions to discuss. Who knew the moment I stepped into the room, he immediately collapsed straight onto the bed, his entire body seemingly fainting away. I suddenly didn't know whether to approach closer or go outside to find a physician. Just moments ago when he'd gripped my hand, his strength had been so powerful. How could he be like this now? Seeing me standing in the middle of the room not saying anything, he sighed softly, turned himself to face inward, then coughed weakly. I approached, using my finger to poke his back, asking, "What's wrong with you?" "Old injuries flaring up, old wounds and new ones tormenting me together. I'm nearly dying from pain yet no one worries about me." He still lay with his back turned, his head buried in the blanket, his voice full of resentment. I replied coldly, "Then let's call a physician. If you're injured, get treatment. If you're sick, get medicine." After speaking, I turned to go find a physician for him. Going to war and battle, how could one not get injured? But I'd only walked a few steps when I couldn't continue. I don't know when he'd turned around, half sitting, half reclining against the bed. He grabbed my sleeve. "Daisy, let's chat a bit." I walked over to sit on the chair in the room, casually picking up the teapot on the table to pour 2 cups. "Speak. I'm listening." He looked at the distance between us, showing dissatisfaction, and patted the spot beside the bed. "Come sit here. I'm very weak right now. I don't have the strength to speak loudly." I hesitated for a while, then reluctantly pulled the chair a bit closer to the bed. "Speak." He cleared his throat and said solemnly, "Perhaps we should get married." I sputtered tea straight into his face. "What the hell are you saying?" His expression unchanged, he wiped it off with his hand, his gaze immediately shifting elsewhere. "Prince Nathaniel has ascended the throne. Before long there'll be rewards based on merit. At that time, he'll certainly grant us marriage." I thought for a moment then said, "Then we should choose an auspicious day." The moment I finished speaking, Ethan immediately grasped my hand tightly. His voice couldn't hide his excitement. "You also hope to marry me?" I pushed his hand away, feeling rather confused. "Hope for what? Isn't this the plan we discussed to deal with Prince Nathaniel? After getting married, a year later we'll use the excuse of incompatible temperaments to divorce amicably." Hearing my words, Ethan's lips pressed slightly together. When he looked at me again, his eyes clearly showed deep frustration. He spoke in a hoarse voice. "You don't want to be with me." I stood there bewildered, not knowing what to do. When did I ever say I wanted to be with you? From after that statement, whenever Ethan Shaw encountered me in the manor or at the dining table, he wore a face cold as ice. The lady stayed with Lord Felix, living in a quieter courtyard. Sometimes I was also curious. What exactly did this thing called love between men and women taste like? For instance, seeing the lady and Lord Felix together, the lady seemed to be Lord Felix's miraculous elixir. With her by his side, in just a few days Lord Felix's gaunt appearance filled with vitality. Even the physician taking his pulse exclaimed in amazement. Speaking of which, I'm so wealthy now. What troubles could I possibly have? Actually, there were some. The lady and Lord Felix were now so inseparable that I couldn't share a bed with the lady even for one night. Moreover, Lord Felix had suffered so much. If I went to compete with him for the lady, even I couldn't bear to do it. Speaking of who in the manor was more miserable than me, there was someone. Ethan somehow spent all day looking like he'd swallowed anger, his face gloomy, constantly wandering back and forth before my eyes to the point where even wanting to be out of sight, out of mind was impossible. I couldn't take it anymore. "Every day you act like I owe you money. What exactly is the matter?" He snorted coldly. "Don't you owe me money?" I was surprised. "I'm the only one who's given you money. When did I owe you?" He opened his mouth then swallowed his words, stood up, swept his sleeves, and strode quickly outside. I thought and thought but couldn't figure it out. After pondering for a long while, I suddenly remembered. Could he be talking about the pouch of silver I received every year? That day, when the imperial marriage decree arrived from the emperor, Ethan and everyone in the manor all knelt to receive the decree. Along with the decree came a large plaque inscribed with 4 characters, "Number 1 Wealth under heaven." I curled my lip. The emperor was truly stingy. I donated half my family fortune, only to receive in return a useless plaque. Couldn't eat it, couldn't use it, couldn't exchange it for silver, yet had to preserve and respect it. In the future, if I ran out of money, hanging up this plaque for everyone to see would be truly mocking. So I gave the plaque to the lady. She'd once said she wanted to become the wealthiest silk merchant. My silver was her silver too. In the future, she could open however many silk shops she wanted. That night, Ethan brought a jar of medicinal ointment and knocked on my room door. I wondered why he didn't have a young servant help him apply the medicine. He pondered for a moment, then answered. The servant went out to handle matters for me. I understood. I took the medicine jar and told him to sit in the chair. The candle on the table flickered. He removed his shirt, exposing his shoulders and back. From years of martial training and battle, his shoulders were broad, his waist slim, his muscles firm and powerful. Only his back was covered with wounds large and small, stretching from his shoulders all the way down to his spine. The deepest, most frightening wounds. The old ones had healed but still showed clearly. The new wounds hadn't yet closed. So severely injured, yet he hadn't said a word, still joking around, making people think he was pretending to be pitiful. I irritably took a large amount of ointment and applied it to his back. He moaned softly as if I'd hurt him. I felt a bit guilty, so I bent down to blow on it gently. I only saw him tremble, seemingly hurting even more. I asked worriedly, "Did I hurt you?" He answered in a voice full of frustration and grievance. "Older sister only worries about her husband. Who in this house cares whether I'm in pain or not?" I couldn't help but lightly swat him once. A great man among men, who spends all day talking about pain. Knowing he was injured, I didn't use force. But unexpectedly, he changed color, clutched his chest with one hand, then spat out a mouthful of fresh blood before collapsing unconscious. I was horrified. Had I actually beaten him to death? He has severe internal injuries and needs rest and treatment. The physician took several medicines from his medicine chest then left. I was so ashamed I didn't dare lift my head. Never imagined that a general would be beaten by me until he coughed blood. Ethan had awakened at some point. His eyes stared intently at me, his gaze like a wolf that had spotted its prey, preparing to drag it back to the den to slowly tear it apart. I approached the bed closer. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." He still looked at me, his eyes revealing a burning intensity that involuntarily made me feel flustered. After a moment, the corner of his mouth quirked slightly. "It's fine. At most I'll just cough up blood for a few more months. I have plenty of blood, nothing to worry about. I just don't know when His Majesty will send me on another mission. At that time, with this broken body, I don't know if I can endure it. But that matter also doesn't concern you. You just worry about your own affairs." If he'd cried out in pain or complained miserably, perhaps I wouldn't have felt so guilty. On the contrary, this understanding, tolerant appearance without any reproach made me feel even more uncomfortable. "How about this? Let me buy you an aged ginseng root for recuperation." He covered his eyes with his hand, his expression full of fatigue. "No need. I can buy it myself. You go outside and worry about your own matters." I twisted my hands awkwardly. "Then let me buy you some delicacies from land and sea." He smiled faintly. "Daisy, I know you're very wealthy now. Before my family met with trouble, I wasn't lacking money either. Those kinds of things. I've eaten them all before." I waved my hands in panic, my voice somewhat flustered. "That's not what I meant. I didn't mean to look down on you. I just want to somehow make up for that punch I gave you." After a long while, he finally lowered his hand and smiled. "You truly want to make it up to me?" Looking at his handsome face under the candlelight, I unconsciously nodded. "If you sincerely want to make up for beating me until I coughed blood, then let me order you around until my wounds heal." "Mother, why did you never tell me that a man with handsome features could bewitch people's hearts so thoroughly?" From the moment I accepted Ethan's request, I regretted it constantly. He truly treated me like a young servant, ordering me around without the slightest consideration. Wherever he went, he'd call me to follow. Even going to the latrine, he'd make me stand outside waiting to hand him paper. I was busy with 100 tasks, 1,000 matters. How could I have free time to follow him wandering everywhere? He just casually waved his hand. "It's fine. I already knew beforehand you'd regret it." I took a deep breath and forced a smile. "Young master, where shall we go next?" I thought he'd take me to a martial arts training ground or somewhere similar. I was still thinking I'd have a chance to broaden my horizons. Who knew that after walking a while, we entered the largest jewelry shop in Hua capital. By coincidence, I ran into an acquaintance. Young Master Quinn Preston of the Preston family. The Preston family was a renowned wealthy clan from the south, their business empire spanning multiple domains. I'd gotten to know him when we'd traded maritime silk together. He was quite the fodderer. Seeing me, his eyes lit up. "Miss Thorne. I came to Hua capital to find friends and was planning to visit your manor to call on you." I nodded slightly and smiled. A worthy friend comes from afar. Naturally I must host you properly. Ethan stood behind, hands clasped behind his back, head bowed staring fixedly at the jewelry on the counter, not glancing at us even once, appearing completely unconcerned. Before leaving, the shop manager brought out an exquisite jewelry box from the inner hall and handed it to him. He pulled several bank notes from his sleeve, then advanced toward me. Let's go. Didn't you want to host this friend? He grabbed my hand and pulled me out of the jewelry shop. As we walked, I kept turning my head back calling, Brother Preston, follow us. Quinn gently nodded, showing a smile with unclear emotions. Honestly, I'd traveled everywhere and encountered various situations, but I'd never fallen into such an awkward predicament as this. The moment we sat down at the dining table, Ethan handed me the wooden box, telling me to open it only at home. I thought this was jewelry he planned to give the lady, so I comfortably accepted it. Who knew he'd look at Quinn and smile? Apologies, Brother Preston, please forgive me. This is jewelry I've prepared for our wedding day. Inconvenient to open here. Hearing the two words, wedding, Quinn froze, then looked toward me. Miss Thorne is getting married. I was completely flustered by Ethan. Before I could speak up to explain, he'd already exclaimed, Daisy, you and Brother Preston are friends, yet he didn't know we're about to marry. After speaking, he even respectfully bowed toward the north, as if thanking His Majesty for granting the marriage. Quinn also exclaimed in shock, there's even an imperial marriage decree. They just kept responding to each other like this, making me sitting in the middle feel truly superfluous. This meal was truly hard to swallow, and I was also subjected to whatever madness possessed Ethan. Throughout the entire meal, he kept piling food into my bowl until it was stacked nearly to my chin, before he finally said gently, eat up, Daisy dear. I nearly spat out yesterday's rice. On the way home, I kept reproaching him. Quinn is from the Preston family. We'll need to cooperate in business in the future. Why did you behave so strangely? He walked quickly, getting farther and farther ahead. I could barely keep up and had to grab his clothes. Walk slower. He stopped and turned to look at me, his eyes reddened, his face cold as ice. I also want to know what exactly I'm doing. I want to know why when I see you smiling at Quinn, my heart feels so bitter. Why when you don't pay attention to me, I feel everything becomes meaningless. Why as long as you're there, my gaze unconsciously revolves around you. With each sentence he spoke, he advanced a step closer to me. I stood frozen in place by his sudden outburst, also shocked by his burning gaze. The distance between us grew so close that my forehead nearly touched his brow. I could see every small expression on his face. He bent down. Clearly 10 years ago, you yourself said you were willing to wait for the one you love. I only thought there was some foolish young lady still waiting for me to return. She loved me like life itself. I absolutely had to survive and return to find her, to marry her. At this point, his voice grew hoarse. I want to ask that young lady. I've survived and returned. Does she still want to marry me? I looked into his eyes, where a thin mist seemed to gather. For a moment I didn't know how to react. Since growing up, no one had ever said they liked me. I'd also never thought that any man in this world would like me. Once at a tavern, when signing a contract for silk goods with a merchant, to my face he praised me as strong and decisive. But the moment he went downstairs, he turned and cursed me as a shoveler. Charles happened to hear when he returned for a forgotten hat, then beat that fellow half to death. I could only compensate some silver and stopped cooperating. Similar incidents had happened countless times. Little Harvey was often overly sentimental. Whenever he consoled me not to mind, before I could even feel sad, he'd already started crying first. Watching father change women like changing clothes, I found men truly tiresome. But that was fine too. If I didn't care about worldly opinions, then the world wouldn't bother me either. But facing Ethan's sincere, expectant gaze, I couldn't bring myself to say any words that would hurt him. Wait, when did I ever say I loved you? Calm down. I pondered carefully. Words of affection like that didn't sound like something I would say. His face gradually turned cold, pain appearing in his eyes. I can endure rejection. You don't need to pretend not to remember. I intended to open my mouth to explain, but then stopped. At this moment, anything I said would just sound like making excuses. That day we parted on the street in a not particularly cheerful atmosphere. Not exactly a parting either, because he just coldly said nothing more to me, but also didn't leave. He only slowly walked behind, seeing me back to the manor before turning to leave. From then on, I somehow contracted insomnia. Before, I'd fall asleep the moment I lay down. But recently, I'd toss and turn endlessly without being able to sleep. Days became busy again. But whenever I had a bit of free time, I'd often wander to the ladies' courtyard, standing behind the door watching what the lady and Lord Felix were doing. Sometimes the lady would roll up her sleeves in the kitchen making food, while Lord Felix sat obediently on a small chair, eyes gazing into space, mouth smiling. Sometimes Lord Felix would rest his head on the lady's lap, while the lady elegantly flipped through books. It seemed that whatever they did, they wanted to be together and never felt bored. The imperial decree had been issued, the wedding date set. But Ethan was nowhere to be seen. How could we get married? During a meal, the lady mentioned him, saying he'd gone to suppress bandits and might not return for several months. When speaking, the lady looked at me, the corners of her mouth smiling slightly with some deep meaning. My face suddenly burned hot, and I awkwardly lowered my head. Could it be he'd already told the lady about those wild words? If this matter affected my image in the lady's heart, I definitely wouldn't forgive him. Come July, I boarded a merchant ship heading out to sea. Harvey and Charles came along. Only after boarding did we discover this didn't seem like an ordinary merchant vessel. Though the people on board wore mismatched clothing, their bearing was resolute, their posture ramrod straight. The ship had already left port. I could only tell myself that having come this far, I might as well settle down. We sat on the deck enjoying the sea breeze when someone emerged from the ship's cabin. I looked closely. Ethan. He wore tight, fitting black clothing, his figure tall and straight, standing upright on deck. Those familiar sword-like eyebrows and phoenix eyes, that straight nose, those thin lips, his tan skin carrying a hard, angular edge. Had he been at sea so long the sun had darkened him? I involuntarily thought to myself, "Why are you here?" He frowned at me, his expression full of displeasure. I answered in surprise, "Weren't you supposed to be suppressing bandits?" It turned out this was a ship disguised as a merchant vessel to eliminate sea pirates. Since that not so pleasant parting, after a period of not meeting, I didn't know what to say either. My mind still held the image of his wounded eyes from that last time. Fortunately, he also didn't approach me for conversation, just stayed busy discussing matters with his subordinates. I could only turn to look at Charles and ask, "What kind of ship did you book?" Charles blinked innocently. "Someone below made the booking. Nothing to do with me." The merchant ship was very large. Everyone had their own small private cabin. That night, the sea wind blew strong. I crawled into my room preparing to rest. The moment I bent down to enter, the door behind me opened then closed. Turning back, Ethan already stood behind me. He bent down, advancing closer, but stopped midway. His figure was tall and large. Even bending down, his head still nearly touched the wooden ceiling above. "What are you doing here?" He showed no expression, handing me a cup of hot tea. "I'm planning to visit Donglang Kingdom to see if there are any rare items." I don't know why, but my heart beat faster than normal. Perhaps it was because this cabin was too cramped. His face was right before my eyes, so close I could smell the faint fragrance emanating from his body. He just kept looking at me intently, his deep gaze bottomless, yet didn't ask anything more. After a moment, he turned his back to leave, pulling the door closed. The moment he left, my entire body suddenly went limp. I collapsed flat on the bed, breathing rapidly, nearly suffocating. Could it have been because two people standing together in such a cramped space? The following days on the ship, we often dined together with Ethan and his brothers. When the sea was calm with gentle waves, they'd take turns jumping into the water to swim, like jumping into steamer baskets. Harvey and Charles admired them endlessly, running to join the fun. Only I remained with Ethan and one person lying on deck drinking wine. We sat there enjoying the sea breeze. No one spoke. The wine drinker suddenly grew interested, telling me about old campaign stories. "Oh right. Do you know our general has a little wife?" Ethan shot him a glare, signaling him to shut up, but he grew even more enthusiastic, calling out loudly, "Brothers, remember the general's little wife." Those swimming in the water laughed heartily, imitating Ethan's voice, "Daisy, Daisy dear, my Daisy. I must go home to pick my Daisy." Hearing them joke and laugh, my face grew hotter and hotter. My gaze wandered, not daring to look toward the left. Were they talking about the peaches I was thinking of? Ethan's expression grew increasingly dark. He immediately stood up, planning to return to the cabin. The wine drinker suddenly approached me closer, smiling as he said, "Everyone thought the general liked eating peaches. Some flatterers even brought baskets of peaches to gift him. We told him to share them, but he absolutely refused. You know what he did in the end?" I sneaked a glance toward Ethan and asked quietly, "What?" "Our general, not letting anyone else eat his peaches, ate 20 or 30 fruits every single day. In the end, he occupied the latrine for an entire day." The moment he finished, everyone burst into laughter. Only Ethan. I only saw him roll up his sleeves, and in a flash he disappeared. When I looked again, the wine drinker had already fallen splash into the sea. I burst out laughing. Looking up, I saw he was also watching me, half smiling. As evening approached, the sea wind suddenly rose. Large waves surged high. The ship rocked violently. We were preparing to enter the cabin one by one when no one noticed a small cracking sound. A mast pole snapped by the wind's force hurtled rapidly toward me. I only heard Harvey and Charles simultaneously shout my name. Before I could react, a powerful force shoved me to one side. "Brother!" Several people shouted out loud simultaneously. The wind was too strong, the ship swayed violently. I struggled to grip the deck railing, crawling with difficulty to the edge to look down at the sea. The black sea with rolling waves. Not a single person's shadow visible. "Ethan!" I screamed out. My hoarse voice echoed across the sea surface. His brothers also tried desperately to call for him around the ship. The storm came quickly and left quickly. When the sea calmed again, dawn had just broken. I sat on deck, my entire body soaked through. I couldn't tell whether it was tears or seawater on my face. Searching and searching, still nothing. Could he really be gone? Thinking that from now on, that person would disappear from this world, I suddenly felt earning money had lost its meaning. Good food had lost its appeal. Everything became tasteless. "Found him!" Harvey exclaimed excitedly to me. I stood frozen for a moment, then quickly stumbled to my feet, following Harvey to the stern, pushing aside the crowd surrounding. I saw Ethan lying on deck, eyes tightly shut, face deathly pale. Around his body wound a thick rope. His brothers all bowed their heads in silence. "Why aren't you saving him?" I asked hoarsely, my voice trembling. No one answered. "Save him." I burst into tears, my voice choked beyond recognition. Seeing them seemingly giving up, I immediately knelt down, using all my strength to press water from his stomach in rhythmic compressions. "What are you doing?" a weak voice sounded. But I paid no attention, continuing to press hard until the person on the ground coughed violently. Only then did I realize he was all right. I sat flat on the ground, laughing and crying simultaneously, continuously pounding lightly on his body. Ethan sat up, frowning as he looked around. Seeing several people turn their heads, their stomachs shaking from suppressed laughter. I was just exhausted. "What were you all doing scaring her like that?" "Everyone go stand punishment on the mast. Not permitted to come down without my permission." "Understood." "Yes, sir." Everyone immediately rose in a daze to follow. Right after, my hand was grasped by Ethan. "I told them to go, not you." He suddenly pulled me forcefully. I lost my footing and tumbled into his chest as solid as iron. Before I could steady myself, he'd already tightened his arms around my waist. My elbow collided with his body painfully, making me involuntarily frown. "Let me go. People are watching." I felt both embarrassed and angry. Struggling proved useless. I could only glare at him. He lowered his head, his breath deep and low. "Without my orders, they don't dare approach." Before I could retort, he'd already started laughing. His voice hoarse and husky, carrying barely concealed excitement. "You only care about people watching." Immediately after, he pulled my hand and walked straight into the ship's cabin, proceeding directly to that narrow room, making me feel as if all the air had been drained away. Inside the room remained only the sound of distant ocean waves and his nearby breathing. The salty, briny smell of seawater permeated the air, making my heart race chaotically. He braced his hands against the wall, his solid body surrounding me, leaving me no escape route. "Just now. Were you worried about me?" His voice was deep and stern, his burning gaze never leaving me. I lowered my head, my eyes resting on the prominent collarbone on his neck, answering softly. "If you didn't return, the lady would be heartbroken." Suddenly, his calloused hand gripped mine tightly. He caressed it gently. The warmth from his palm gradually spread to my heart, making even the tips of my fingers tremble. Seeing me remain silent, he suddenly knelt down, looking up at me intently. Both his hands grasped mine, his voice deep and settling as if wanting to pierce through heart and lungs. What about you? I bit my lip, speaking quietly. I don't know. Before I'd finished speaking, he suddenly gripped my waist, pulling me down into his embrace. A warm breath swept across my lips. He kissed me. Right at that moment, a hollow thunk sounded by my ear. Turned out he'd stood up too hastily, his head hitting the wooden beam. I burst out laughing. Ethan didn't care about the pain. His gaze remained fixed on my lips, his voice husky as if unable to restrain himself. You didn't refuse me. My laughter caught in my throat. He lowered his head again, kissing me once more. His hands tightened around my waist, holding me in his embrace without letting go. My heart beat so wildly I could barely breathe. My entire body melted against his chest, without a shred of strength left to resist. He rested his forehead against mine, his eyes blazing like someone lovesick who just won their treasure. You kissed me back. You must take responsibility for me. I laughed, my breathing still unsteady. Take responsibility how? The corners of his mouth curved up. He released me, turned and rushed out the door. In just a moment I heard his voice calling out loudly. Brother Hu, tell the helmsman to turn the ship around. From afar came a response full of confusions. Brother Yan, we haven't caught the pirates yet. His voice rang out joyfully like a child who'd won a prize. Return first. I'll treat you all to celebratory wine. Outside the window, white clouds drifted lazily across the deep blue sky. I stood up, lightly dusting my skirts. As I walked outside I called out irritably, Ethan, are you tired of living? I haven't even agreed yet. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments.